To the SBAM daily briefing. It's Monday, March 30th, day 7 of Stay Home, Stay Safe, and the 14th day of daily briefings. For those of you who've been following this daily briefing for a while, we started in our office, and as we closed our offices in compliance with the executive order, Stay Home, Stay Safe, we have essentially taken SBAM to be a virtual organization, and all of our team are still at work, and our entire focus, as we've said, is to help small businesses in Michigan through this crisis. So maybe I should introduce myself. I'm Rob Fowler. I'm the CEO of the Small Business Association of Michigan. I've been sort of teaming with Brian Kelly, our president. Brian, if you've been watching, has his home office in his car. And it's become kind of a thing. Brian, you're there again today.
Yeah, and don't expect to see that to change anytime soon. I did kind of scope out my house looking for a place, and there's just no safe place to do it. I mean, it's so distracting. There'd be paper airplanes flying past and stuff getting spilled and the dog barking. And yeah, my car is the best option.
All right. Well, I'm glad it works, and we do what we need to do to try to keep small businesses informed. I want to ask those of you who are with us today if you would check in. If you're listening on Facebook, if you would comment or say hi or something, just to sort of check in, to be a part of the community. Same with Zoom. If you are there, you can ask a question, make a comment on Zoom. And if you would do those things, it would help us just sort of understand who's a part of this conversation. Over the last few days, I have talked to a number of people who said we've been watching daily briefing, and I had no idea. So it'd be nice to know who's on. So just check us out. Well, let's start, Brian, with a little bit of a look back to last week. It was a crazy week. We started it thinking something big was going to come out of Washington, and then ultimately it did. If we go back to even the week before, where the Families First Act passed, we'll talk about that a little bit more in a minute, but it requires small businesses to provide paid sick leave and family medical leave, two things a lot of small businesses didn't know a lot about, and we'll dig a little deeper in those. But that was the first sort of layer that came out of Washington, and then last week we saw the passage of the CARES Act. Let's just do a little bit of recap on what small businesses need to know.
So there are two pretty big parts of the CARE Act that directly impact almost every type of small business out there. Maybe I should say every type of small business out there. First, I'll cover the simple part. With respect to the unemployment system, if you were self-employed before, or a 1099 contractor, or if you're the owner of a business but you never paid unemployment insurance assessments on yourself, then you didn't qualify for unemployment. They have changed that in the CARES Act, and they've still got to send rules down to the state. It probably won't be available this week, but maybe next week. So the unemployment system is actually going to cover some business owners now if a business is no longer viable, or if the paycheck protection loan for some reason doesn't make sense for you. So that's just kind of stick a pin in that one, if you will, one big change. But also for your employees, any employee that got laid off, they're all going to get a $600 a week raise. And this is going to matter during the unemployment system. This is going to matter when we start talking about calling people back to work, because there are some circumstances where employees will make more money on unemployment than they make working for you. And so this is going to create kind of a conundrum when you're calling people back, and there might be a disincentive for it. So let's talk about the the paycheck protection program, those loans, forgivable loans. A lot more details are now becoming available. One of the things is, as you calculate the size of loan that you can qualify for, it's 250% of your average monthly payroll. So the question has come up, well, what average of what? What goes into the average? What time period are we talking about? And so there's been this date, these two dates that have shown up in a bunch of fact sheets, but it was never tied back and originally to what it was used for. Remember the dates, February 15th, 2019. So last year, February 15th, 2019 through June 30th, 2019. That's the time period where you're calculating the average monthly payroll expenses. It includes the payroll, overtime, commissions. You can include the business owner's salary as well, but nothing over $100,000 for any employee. And then but it's also retirement contributions, state and local taxes,
And health insurance benefits.
yeah, and health insurance benefits.
And so all benefits as well as contributions to retirement.
It really is a comprehensive look of all those expenses that go into your payroll. So you add all that up during the time period that I just gave you, figure a monthly average times 250%, and that's the size of loan that you can get. And so you really should be able to get a pretty good idea, a rough estimate yourself, just looking at your own books and your own expenses during that time period, and figure out the loan that you're going to go and apply for come, hopefully, they say this Friday, maybe that banks will have all the paperwork they need to start processing loans. But here's the other thing is $350 billion is a lot. Technically, it's $349 billion. But what's $1 billion between friends, I guess, is why so many of the fact sheets say 350 billion. But that sounds like a lot, and it is a lot, but there's way more demand for payroll support than that in the country right now. So we do encourage people to not delay your application. Banks are going to be a little bit frustrated because, of course, they're getting a lot of calls right now, but they have not received the forms and the instructions from the SBA yet, but they will very soon. We do recommend that you go ahead and let your bank know that you're going to apply for this. Kind of get your name in there, get in line, and make sure that you don't miss out on it. And then as you move forward in the forgivable part of the equation, you just have to make sure that you maintain the head count to what it was in that previous period, pre-crisis period, at the same rate of pay and the same benefits. So that's what this loan is for 8 weeks. You can also use it to pay interest on your debt, not principal, but interest on debt, rent, and utilities. And if you do those things, you'll go back to your bank, you'll give them the paperwork showing that you did it, and then they let the SBA know that they checked, and the loan is forgiven. The SBA literally sends money to the bank to pay off that loan. So that's the gist of it. And more and more of the details come out. We're even getting a sense for seasonal businesses that you can move that time period, so it doesn't start until March 1st, for example. But it's really a program is going to be relevant for any business, almost any business that wants to go back when things return to the new normal, whatever that is and whenever that is. If your goal and intention is to do that, then this probably makes sense for you.
So Brian, I think it's interesting. A forgivable loan is not something that is in the lexicon of most small business owners. There's probably another way to think about this. It's a grant. And that is something that most small business owners are clearly not accustomed to, because it's not a common occurrence to have the government literally give money to what. Just one more time. Why does this make any sense for the government to do this? I feel like small business owners are like a little bit of what's the catch, or too good to be true. And I think it's important for them to understand why.
And I keep on thinking as I go through these documents, as I go through the Public Act, as I go through what the Senate and the House and the SBA are putting out, I'm I'll find something like, aha, see, this isn't as good a deal as what we thought before, but I haven't found that yet. And so what they say they're trying to accomplish here is to help businesses to keep their teams together, right? To keep the people that make running your business possible whole, so that when things, hopefully in a couple months, when things are back to normal, and I don't think it'll ever be the same as it was before, but whatever that new normal is, that you'll be ready to go, that you won't have to hire new people. You won't have to go through a training phase. You won't have the expense of building a team again. Your team is still going to be together. And the theory is that this will help the economic recovery kind of snap back up to what it was before, as opposed to a gradual and slow build back to what it was.
So it's called the Payroll Protection Program. I think there is no reason for every business in the state of Michigan, every small business in the state of Michigan, shouldn't pay attention to this one and think about, there's just almost no reason not to apply for this. So tomorrow we have a webinar that goes deep on the CARES Act. It starts at 10 o'clock. Our experts will be the CPAs from Maynard Casterison, and right now there are 550 registered. There's a limit of 1,000. In 48 hours, we sold it out, and we were able to raise the limit from 500 to 1,000. So register for that. We'll show it again after it is done. I mentioned, well, I'll come back to that. Let's stay with the Families First Act. This is the first of those two federal bills that came along before the CARES Act. This is the one that requires small businesses to do paid sick leave and family medical leave, and pays them back for keeping people on sick leave or medical leave. Scott Lyon is our Senior Vice President. He does benefits and is involved in, really is an expert in this whole field as it relates to small business and benefits. He's been paying attention to this piece in particular. Let me turn it to you, Scott, to just kind of remind small business what this thing is about.
So it's multiple components to it. There's paid sick leave for the first 80 hours, followed by an extension or an expanded Family Medical Leave Act that, when combined, it's a total time off, time away requirement of up to 12 weeks. And I think the first thing to think about is that it kicks in on April 1st. So all of the folks online with us need to at least become aware of what the requirements are, what the dollars and cents that they would have to pay to an employee that's either out on paid sick leave or on the Family Medical Leave Act. There's also a poster that has to be provided to your employees. And, you know, normally we or anyone else would throw that up in our break room or in the wherever we put all the other required posters. That's a little bit more challenging right now that everybody's working remotely. But there is a version on our website, and you can email that version to your employees. And that's also a requirement that is front and center from the Department of Labor that you must comply with. The one thing that we've been getting a lot of questions about, that we've been waiting for the answer from the Department of Labor, is this 50 employee exemption. Under the Families First Response Act, it does allow for an exemption of companies with fewer than 50 employees. Not 50 employees, but fewer than 50 employees. And the Department of Labor, the Wage and Hour Division, just over the last 24 hours or so, published the 59 most frequently asked questions and answers. We have that up on our website. Our members can get to it. But the three that are most relevant, I think, to our members are number 4, number 58, and number 59. Number 4 is all about how do I take advantage of the small business exemption. And because they're new and because I haven't committed it to memory, let me just look at the Q&A and tell you exactly what it says. It says, to elect this small business exemption, you, or the small business owner, should document why your business with fewer than 50 employees meets the criteria set forth by the department, which will be addressed in more detail in forthcoming regulations. So they don't want you to mail anything into the Department of Labor, but they do want you to think about documenting it, or said differently, how do you explain why you think you are worthy of an exemption? So that's the first one. So you do have to document it. It does have to be done by an officer of the corporation. And once you have that, then you flip over to questions number 58 and 59. And 58 starts by saying, an employer, including a religious or nonprofit organization, so it expands it a little bit. It's not just for profit, it's nonprofits and religious organizations. How do you go about doing this? How do you determine it? And there are three things that you need to look at when you're doing it. So you're looking at whether it would jeopardize having people off on paid leave or family medical leave would jeopardize the viability of the small business as a going concern. A small business may claim this exemption if an authorized officer of the business has determined that, and there's three things to look at. You're exempt if, as a result of this, the small business's expenses and financial obligations exceed available resources, available revenues, and cause the small business to cease operating at minimal capacity. So that's the first one. The second one is the absence of the employee or employees requesting paid sick leave or expanded family and medical leave would entail a substantial risk to the financial health or operational capabilities of the small business because of their specialized skills, knowledge of the business, or responsibilities. So think of that as your key people in your company. If they're not there, you can't produce your goods, your services, and that's going to result in revenues dropping off so fast that your company would no longer be viable. That's the second exemption. And the third one is if there are not sufficient workers who are able, willing, and qualified, and who will be available at the time and place needed to perform the labor or services provided by the employee or employees requesting paid sick leave or expanded family and medical leave. And these labor or services are needed for the small business to operate at minimal capacity. So number 2 and 3 are versions of the same thing, really. It's all about whether you have the employees you need to be able to operate your business. That's number 58 on this document. Number 59 is a little of expansion of number 4. And it's, if I'm a small business with fewer than 50 employees, am I exempt from the requirements to provide paid sick leave or expanded family and medical leave? The answer is yes. If you are an employer that employs fewer than 50 employees, if leave is requested because of the child's school or place of care is closed, or child care providers unavailable due to the COVID-19 related reasons, and an authorized officer of the business has determined that at least one of the 3 conditions of number 58 is satisfied. So I would direct our listeners right back to that Q&A, because these are the 3 that we're talking about right now, but there's 59 of them in total, and they're actually fairly well done. You can easily understand them, and go back and most of the questions that I've seen come in through our Facebook page are answered in this document.
All right, Scott, thank you. Let me see if I can summarize just a little bit. So on Wednesday, you are required to send a poster, to put a poster up in your business and send it to your your remote employees. And that poster is on our website, and you can go grab it and comply with that. 2, the way you get an exemption is if you believe that your company, if it would jeopardize the viability of your company to provide that leave. And 3, this can be self-certified. That is, an officer of the company has to explain why these conditions are met, the ones that Scott just mentioned. And that self-certification is the answer to the question, like, where do I apply, or how do I apply for it? And I think the guidance right now is you certify that you're exempt from it, and exempt yourself. We'll go a little deeper on that on a webinar that's coming up later this week.
Yeah, it sounds, Rob, like there's additional guidance coming on that piece, but start thinking about why you would be exempt.
Okay. Thank you, Scott. Appreciate that. I want to turn now to kind of the state level. We've been talking about mostly what's happening from Washington. We've gotten some further guidance from the administration in a couple of different areas. Let me turn it to you, Brian, for a little update there.
All right. So one thing I want to encourage you to do is to continue to follow the governor's FAQs when it comes to what can be open and what needs to be closed. Because I think I mentioned last week that they're going to be more likely to articulate when the answer is no than when the answer might be yes. And that is holding true. So there have been some other no's delivered on those FAQs. However, there are other things that there are different subsets that there are additional executive orders that are going to continue to impact or potentially impact you. One of which, actually a couple of them that just came out today and yesterday. The scope of practice for medical providers, they're waiving a lot of scope of practice issues so that capacity for dealing with people that are sick, particularly in Southeast Michigan where there's lots of new cases, that's being expanded, or a lot of scope of practice limitations are being waived. Also, restaurants can now work with the Department of Agriculture to do more than just deliver food ready to eat, but also to sell prepackaged food, somewhat like a grocery store would. And so that's for those. Apparently there have been restaurants that have been asking for this. Like, actually, I could be involved in a wider array of food business as long as I'm making deliveries to somebody's house. Why does it have to be food ready to eat right now? It could be other things as well. So there are different things that are continuing to come out in terms of scope and ability to operate and what somebody can and can't do. But I also want to I want our small businesses to start thinking longer term than April 13th, because the president has decided that nationally the CDC guidelines on how to operate and the social distancing recommendations and requirements to be extended out to the 30th of April. I think it is highly likely that our state government will make the same determination on the stay home, stay safe order. Now, maybe toward the end of that, it won't be quite as robust in terms of the limitations on what you can do. But I do want you to start thinking longer term than just a couple weeks from now, because with the guidance coming out of DC, it's unlikely that the decision makers here in Michigan are going to let up on the stay home, stay safe order as long as the CDC guidelines of social distancing stay in place.
All right. Not necessarily good news, but we're just trying to make sure that our members understand what's happening real time. And I think all the signals are it may well be April 30th that the stay home, stay safe gets moved out too. Brian, we also saw some guidance on the unemployment insurance issue, and particularly you alluded to it early on, the sort of layering in of state UI and the federal support for unemployment insurance. But it also opened it up to some new players. Would you talk about that a little bit? Maybe where people could go for more information.
Yeah. So the state government is now announcing and reacting to what was passed by the feds last Friday, signed by the president last Friday. So they will be sending over to our to each state will get money. Part of that $2.2 trillion goes to expanding unemployment benefits. So that was done by the federal government, but then the state governments are the ones who have to operationalize that. So today, the governor's office sent out a release that described what that would be. However, just like on those payroll protection loans, state government is still in a position where they have to wait for the federal government to give them specific rules on how they approve people for unemployment and exactly what benefits are given in which circumstances. So, but we know what they put in their press release today is pretty similar to what we were talking, or actually the same as what we were talking about over the weekend, if you happen to watch then or on Friday. So it's been expanded for sole proprietors and 1099 contractors, and it's a $600 raise per week for everyone. So whatever you were getting before, it gets increased by 600. If you're a sole proprietor or a business owner not treated as an employee or a 1099 contractor, before you were zero, and so you get to 600. You'll still file in a file this with the same system, but they're having to make adjustments to the system because, for example, if you're a sole proprietor, when you get to the field where you got to put the employer number in there, well, you don't have one because you've never paid into the unemployment system before. So they've got to make those types of adjustments. I know that they're meaning to do that very, very quickly. They're hoping to have that up and running soon. To any former employees that you had to lay off, or if you're planning on laying people off, or you think that you're going to be in that position soon, the volume has been so high that they are now asking for filings to happen differently. That people whose name starts with A through L, your last name A through L, Monday, Wednesday, Friday are the days that you can file. If it's M through Z, then it's Tuesday and Thursday. It's just the volume is such that they can't have everybody every day. And breaks my heart to say that, but those are the times we're in right now.
Wow, that's it's just kind of mind-boggling where we've gotten to. Thank you, Brian, for the sort of updates and staying on top of that. Let me just sort of begin to wrap up by saying a couple things. We mentioned Friday that we've come to realize these daily briefings may keep us up to date on what's going on, hopefully keep you as business owners up to date on what's going on, but it doesn't really allow us the ability to go deep and answer questions in specific areas. So the payroll protection program is a great example. So tomorrow we're doing a webinar, and you're going to see us do more and more webinars to go deep and answer these questions. So tomorrow, 10 o'clock, the CARES Act. Wednesday, we'll be doing a webinar on the issue of essential versus non-essential. That's the language everybody's using. Is my company essential? Am I essential? That's really not the language of the law. The language of the law is critical infrastructure. And on Wednesday, we're going to help walk through both critical infrastructure companies and people inside your business, if you're still operating virtually, who could be considered to be essential employees. So that's at noon on Wednesday, and we're doing that along with the law firm Warner, Norcross and Judd. On Thursday, we're doing a webinar on the HR and legal issues that are brought about as a result of all this. And that is also at noon with the law firm Bodman and our partner with our legal hotline. So Tuesday, the CARES Act. Wednesday, essential versus non-essential. Thursday, HR and legal issues that rise up. And Friday, we're doing a webinar on navigating the financial part of this COVID-19 thing, including the resources that are available through these grants and loans, and just trying to pull them all apart and understand them. So lots going on. We hope that maybe while you have some potential downtime, you're able to spend some time on these webinars. We've really decided that our job right now is to, you must be drinking from a fire hose, and our job is to really curate that information. We're trying to put the very best and most succinct and most clear guidance on our website. We're changing it daily. Our entire staff is working on finding the latest and the best and putting on that website. Our daily briefings will continue at 3 o'clock every afternoon, and hope you continue to join us. You can ask questions at sbam@sbam.org. And Thursday, Senator Gary Peters will be joining us and answer some questions about how this sort of came together in Washington. Thanks for joining us. See you tomorrow at 3, and remember, wash your hands.
And don't touch your face. Stay safe and be well. Good luck, everybody.